Are you there, Barbara?
I am Terry. Hello.
Say, great to have you back on the show. It's been a couple of years.
To be back. It has. It's been a couple of years.
I know, but today, well, we're going to catch up with as much as we can and talking about your recent album, The Flower Suite. But first, can you give the listeners a little idea of your beautiful classic music upbringing, please?
My upbringing.
Barbara.
Well, my upbringing, my first influence really was my grandfather, and he was a dyed-in-the-wool folkie who sang and played concertina and ocarinas and whistles.
Oh.
My parents weren't particularly musical, not until later in life.
Right.
My mother then joined a choir, and my father started to listen to classical concerts on the radio. I did have a musical uncle, Uncle Buddy, after Buddy Rich.
Oh, wow.
And my Uncle Bud was a drummer.
Oh.
So there were definitely musical genes in the family, just so kind of dotted about. And I suppose, with hindsight, I was a musical child. You know, looking back on it, having been a music teacher myself, I could hear different parts of musical arrangements in my head when I was 4.
Wow.
But you never think of that sort of thing as unusual until you realise other people don't do it.
Shows how special you are then.
Well, you know, I think there are lots of people who can do that, but they never really realise that they have a talent in that. School, well, music at school wasn't particularly brilliant, you know, in those days.
Yes, yeah.
It was very sporadic, really. I managed to get to learn to play the recorder, as most of us do.
Oh, wow.
And when I was 10, I started piano lessons. And really, learning to play the piano was my introduction to the world of music. That's in a school radio programme, good old school radio programme called Singing Together. Do you remember that?
Sure, that's
going back, isn't it?
Yes, I'd rather not think you've... Oh, wow, yes.
I know, I used to love it, though. And even if I was off sick, I'd listen to it on the radio.
Oh, you are rascal, you.
Once I could play from music, the world really opened up. Right. And I used to go out and spend my pocket money on sheet music.
Oh, wow, yes.
Because, you know, we really, I suppose looking back on it, we didn't have a lot of money. No. And we didn't have a record player because my parents weren't particularly musical. So I used to go and buy sheet music. And I got the Beatles and Scott Joplin and all the pop of the day. And even piano arrangements of Herb Halbert and all sorts. And, of course, I did love folk music as well.
Of course, yes. Well.
I had to, didn't I, really? and later I really loved Steeleye Span and the Irish bands, Planksty and Andy Irvine, and Alan Stivell, who brought out Renaissance of the Celtic harp in the 70s.
Well, speaking of harp, haven't you just got a new harp or something?
Yes, my little baby, my pride and joy. Oh, it's just beautiful, Terry. It really is.
You'll have to send me a picture of it, please.
I will. Yeah. I'll send you a picture of me playing it, doing finger exercises at the moment. I'm working towards playing.
Right.
Well, I can play a few tunes.
Well,
but I want to be better, really, than I am. And I need to practice, as, you know, we always have to.
Of course. Practice makes perfect.
It does. Apparently it does, yes.
Oh, dear. Well, that seems very inspiring. Well, obviously we're here to talk about your album, The Flowers Suite. What's the general concept behind the album? Obviously, it's to do with your affinity with flowers, trees and fields. So, what inspired it, I wonder?
Well, it was written after I moved to Wales from England. And on the back of the CD cover, I explain a little bit of its origins. To explain it, really, I've got to backtrack a bit. If I'm gabbling on, just shut me up, Terry.
No, you gabble on.
My grandfather bought a piece of land at Brandon, which is a little village in England, between Coventry and Rugby.
That rings a bell, yeah.
Yeah, not very far from you, really.
Yeah.
I spent virtually every summer Sunday of my childhood there, and in those days it was in the country. But now, of course, Coventry's sprawled out much closer. And when I was a child, I was kind of left to roam in the fields and the woods, and I ticked off my animal and bird species in my I Spy books. Remember those I Spy books?
I do, yes, wow.
And I used to really enjoy just being there.
Yeah.
And my parents grew fruit and vegetables and flowers as well. But when I moved to Wales, I had to leave it all.
Oh.
And on the back of the CD cover, I've shared a dream that I had. And I was walking down the lane to this piece of land when I came to a fork in the road.
Right.
And it seemed to just appear, or it could have been there all the time, and I couldn't see it. And the lane led to our piece of land, but the fork led out into unknown countryside. And I wanted to follow the new way, but I didn't want to leave the old one.
Yes, yeah.
And in the dream, I stuck to the old way, but I regretted it.
Oh.
And I thought, well, I know what's here. I want to know what's there. And then, not long after that, this move to Wales opened up as a possibility. And I just knew I had to go, even though it was really a wrench to leave.
I bet, yeah.
And there isn't really an English word that describes it, but there is a Welsh word, and it's hiraeth.
Oh.
And hiraeth means a deep connection to the land and a longing for things that were, or maybe never really were.
Oh.
And the flower suite was largely me coming to terms with leaving these places associated with a lot of my life and entering into something new, this undiscovered country.
Well, we're going to find out a little bit more about them, aren't we, by talking about it. About 3 or 4 tracks, aren't we? You're going to have a little listen to Sweet William for about a minute or so.
Okay.
Here we go. Williams, one of our favourite tracks, isn't it, Lady Hawke? Who's playing the accordion? Is it you?
I play everything. Everything. I'll tell you a bit more about that later.
Oh. I like that.
But, yes, I play absolutely everything.
Oh. Wow.
In fact, I do everything.
Well, that's what ladies do.
We'll get to that.
But how did you choose the name of the flower to suit the
Sweet
music?
William.
Yes, yeah.
Well, each track that I've written on the album starts with a flower, but once I've started, I'm bringing in other things as well. And when I'm composing, I try not to be too prescriptive.
Yes, yeah.
And often I only find out what I'm really saying in the act of writing, or even afterwards. You know, it's a very weird thing. And various thoughts came together to produce Sweet William. One part of it was the flower, because they're so colourful.
Yes, yeah.
And they've got a gorgeous scent, and they kind of breathe childhood summers.
Oh.
And the flowers reminded me, the stripy little flowers reminded me of carnival skirts.
Oh.
And then I started to think about carnivals, and that led me on to a picture in my inspiration folder.
Oh.
And I originally wanted to be a painter, so I started this folder of inspiring pictures. Way back in ancient history, this is, even before the internet.
Yes.
And I remembered a cutting that I had from a fashion photo shoot of a Harlequin and Columbine. And in my mind, this really fitted alongside the carnival flowers. So I produced a painting and a piece of music with it. And this is how Sweet William happened, really. And I say, is it a flower or a person? Only you can decide.
Oh, okay, I like that. Well, we shall listen to that in a different aspect when we look at it tomorrow sometime. But, okay, now moving on to Love in a Mist. This is going to be interesting. Let's have a little listen to that. Here we go, Barbara. This is 102.3 HFM. We're proud to be local, global,
and beyond.
Listen to the Hawke Chill Out Sessions, and we are interviewing the delightful Barbara Hills, and we're talking about her album, yes, The Flower Suite. Now this, Love in a Mist, there's got to be a story here somewhere, Barbara, yes.
Well, we used to grow these Love in a Mist at Brandon. And I'll never forget just the delight of seeing one for the first time.
Aww.
It's a lovely sky blue flower, and it's surrounded by light ferny leaves, and it kind of peeps out shyly from these ferny leaves. So that's where I began. And then in my mind, the border grew to a bank of Sweet Williams.
Ooh.
Not Sweet Williams, I'm in the wrong one. Love in the Mist.
Love in the Mist, yes.
And the bank led to a river, and it was evening, a lovely warm evening, and the mist was just beginning to rise from the water.
Ooh.
And there was a boat with 2 people in it.
Ooh.
And the rest is up to you.
Right. Okay, well, with Love in the Mist, who knows, but yeah, okay. Yes, we get a better part of this so quickly. Oh, that's great. I like that. How romantic is that?
I know, it is really, isn't it?
Okay, well, talking about Love in the Mist, we'll now go to the first snowdrop.
Okay.
Here we go.
Fragile, strong is the first song. Fragile, strong is the first song. Fragile, strong is the first song to be.
That's absolutely beautiful track, and the lyrics I love completely. And I like a white lady in a green mantle. There's got to be a story here.
It's a kind of the folk influence, I suppose, isn't it?
Yes, of course.
Well, this one nearly didn't make it to the album at all.
Oh.
Because I wasn't really sure about including a song.
Right.
I'm glad I did it now, though, because lots of people like it.
Yeah.
And it would have been the first one that I dropped if I was going to drop one.
Oh.
But I'm glad I didn't.
No.
Now.
No.
And the origin of it, in 2010, I spent a summer recovering from an operation.
Right.
And I was confined to the sofa for several weeks.
Oh.
And there was one little triangle of garden that I saw every day. And I knew that every January, one snowdrop would push up there, just one flower.
Yeah.
But one snowdrop is often the first sign of spring, and it's
course,
a symbol of
yes.
hope, isn't it? And
Yes, it
better
is.
things to come. And I started to think about how fragile that flower seems,
Yeah.
but how strong it must be in its will to live and to grow. And it ignores the frost and the snow, and it just gets on with the business of doing what it was made to do, to bloom. And it seemed to me a small triumph, really.
Yeah.
And then I thought, in a way, all new life is a triumph. And one white lady in a green mantle becomes a crowd of triumphs. And so really, that's where the song comes from.
Ah, right. That's me thinking it was you were the white lady.
Well,
in the
perhaps
green
I am, in a way.
I think
In a
so.
way. You know, at that time, surviving.
Yes. Well, we'll go on to the next track and have a listen to that, so we can hear all about you wandering through the heather. Here we are.
Okay.
Where heather grows.
Where heather grows.
Here we go. Obviously you will love walking through the fields covered in heather. I can just see you now, wandering through. Oh.
Yes, struggling up the mountain, sitting down for a rest every 200 yards.
Oh, you're giving it all away now.
I know.
Oh,
if only it was as romantic as it sounds. Well, this is about my new home in the Cambrian Mountains in Montgomeryshire. And we are kind of halfway up a small mountain.
Oh, right.
And above the tree line, the mountain tops are covered with heather and bilberry and gorse.
Lovely.
And in this piece, I'm sitting on a hillside. I'm far above my new home. And kites are wheeling on the thermals, and buzzards sit on the dead tree branches. But I'm thinking back through the years when this place here was a prosperous mining area.
Oh, of course.
And not far away they mined silver, copper, lots of heavy metals. And it was a bustling community here. There was a school, far more houses than there are now. Now it's just a sleepy little hamlet.
Yeah.
And this piece is really about me connecting to the past of this place, which is now inhabited by the heather and the buzzards.
Oh.
And you can hear the birds, you can hear the buzzards in it as well a bit later on.
Oh, I look forward to hearing the buzzards. Well, okay, we've got another track to go, but before we talk about or listen to it, where can the listeners find out a little bit more about yourself and indeed purchase this release and other releases? And I know you're working on a new one. I know you are.
Right, well, everything about me is on my website, which is houseinthewoodproductions.com.
Okay.
Everything's there. You can find out more about me on my Facebook music page, which is facebook.com House in the Wood Productions 1. I'm at iTunes, Apple Music, Tidal, Spotify, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and any store that partners with MediaNet. I'm also at Bandcamp.
Oh, right.
And you can purchase the limited edition hard copy CDs from Bandcamp.
Oh, wow.
At barbarahills.bandcamp.com.
Well, I'm sure everybody's busy going to be going straight to that on the internet. Get a laptop out, darling. There we go, yeah.
And can I just say, there are only 300 available of the Flowers Suite. Well, in fact, there aren't that now because they're being sold. So if you want a copy, you need to get over to Bandcamp. You can also buy digital albums there, or just download your favourite track if you want to.
Oh.
And the nice thing about Bandcamp is you can listen to the whole song before you buy it. Not just little clips, so you know what you're getting.
Wow, that's a very, very good marketing way, that is. Oh. Well, now, we did speak early in the week that we don't do any live performances anymore, not for the last 3 years, etc.
No.
But if you did, where would you like to perform? Say in England or even the USA? They'd love to have you over there.
Bless them.
They want you over there.
Oh.
Sherry Finzer would love you over there.
Oh, bless her. I don't do live performances. I am a completely studio-orientated person, really.
Yeah.
If I really had to perform and you were twisting my arm, I would be in the wet upland oak woods of the ancient kingdom of Merioneth.
Oh, wow.
And I'd perform to the bluebells and the ferns.
No, dear. Well, just lay down on the lawn and that's it.
I'd have to drag a generator up there.
Well, yes. Oh, yes, I forgot about that, yeah.
Yeah, that would spoil it a bit, wouldn't it?
A little bit. Well, again, when I'm looking at the album now, so these two lucky people, I've got a copy of this and you've signed it. So what more could anybody want?
Absolutely.
So, cool. But has anybody else contributed to the album that you'd like to mention or credit, etc.?
Well, the credits. Now, I probably need to tell you about credits here because I never put credits on my albums, apart from occasionally my hubby and one of my sons who take photographs. The reason I don't put credits on is because I actually do everything. And it would be really boring and repetitive to list it all. And I briefly thought about doing what Patrick McGowan used to do with The Prisoner, showing my age there. Yeah. I used to make up alternative names for people and have all these sort of alter egos. And I thought, no, the fact is, that I compose, arrange, I perform, I record, I mix, I master, I produce, I do everything, really. I design the artwork, I do all the admin.
Wow.
I really do it all, and you know, it has taken me 20 years to learn all the skills involved. I play all the instruments. On the design front, I began life thinking I was going to be a painter.
Yes,
and I did go to art college, and I painted the oil painting on the cover of this one.
Ah, lovely.
It's the sundial and marigolds and cornflowers in my garden. And the CD itself has got a honeysuckle design on it.
Oh, right.
Which that pushed me a bit. I had to dredge up my art school screen printing knowledge for that one. But it just shows nothing is wasted, I suppose.
Well, ladies don't waste anything.
We don't.
No, we don't. Oh, dear. Well, we've got one more chat to listen to, which is what I call the up-tempo, called On Hawkweed Bank. Here we go.
Okay.
I'd never heard of hawkweed. Like, obviously, my name is Hawke, but that's got an E on it. But what is hawkweed, I wonder?
Yes. Well, this was really inspired where I live, by where I live, because we're kind of halfway up a mountain. It means there's a certain amount of terracing. To build,
yeah.
You have to cut into the mountain, or you have to build up areas with stone. And our garage is on a built-up area of stone. Because it's stone, nothing lush will grow there, but hawkweed grows there. And hawkweed, it's a wild flower. It's quite tall. It's about 3 feet high. It's got small dandelion-like flowers that turn into white furry heads. And its leaves are a bit dry-looking. It's a bit of a scrubby, eke-out an existence where you can kind of plant, really. And at the bottom of the bank where it grows, a mountain stream runs by. When we arrived here, I was really struck by its odd beauty. And in the autumn, the seed heads dry out and they rattle in the breeze. Hence all those kind of small, dry, rattly, squeaky almost sounds in the music. And at the end of the track, attention moves to the stream that's flowing onto lush fields, as it does in reality, just over the way here. So that's really where it comes from.
Oh, well, very descriptive. Both musically, emotionally, and visually and musically. Oh, well, it's been fabulous talking about this latest album, etc. But as I said, we were good enough to supply me with 2 signed copies of the Flowers, etc. And Lady Hawke's the daughter's been making a note of all the email flooding in asking for a copy. So I'll hand you over to her. Over to you, Lady Hawke.
Yeah. Hello, Barbara.
Hello, daughter.
Good to have you with us again.
It's lovely to be here.
Oh, good. Well, I need you to call out a couple of numbers for me.
Right.
First, a number between 1 and 10, please.
2.
Well, 2, that's Steve Toadstool Hugger Judd in England.
Well, that's his old nickname, that is. Yeah,
yes,
wow,
it is.
Well done.
And a number between 11 and 20.
Oh, 15.
Well, 15, that's Peter Flanagan down in Southampton.
Oh.
So they both stay here.
Oh.
Yeah.
They're all staying in the UK, not going across the pond at all. But, well, look, thank you, Barbara. It's been fabulous having you back on the show. And please give our regards to all your family and all the flowers and the banks and the snow and the snowdrops, whatever it is.
Yes.
Thank you. Have you got a closing comment to the listeners of the Hawke Chill Out Sessions, please?
Well, really, just to say thank you, and to thank you for having me on the show, and to the listeners, thank you very much for listening, because without you, only the kites and the buzzards and maybe the odd sheep would hear my music. So viva the listeners, and a massive thanks to you.
Okay, thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Terry.
Stay on the line. I've got word with you off air, but thank you.
Thank you.
Barbara
Bye-bye.
Hill.
Bye.
Baroness
Bye-bye,
Barbara
Barbara.
Hill.
Bye.